The IDAWRA is dedicated to the advancement of water resources management, research, and education. Members represent a community of water professionals with diverse backgrounds, but they share engagement in solving some of the toughest water resources challenges. Thank you to our sponsors and members, Avista Corporation, Brown & Caldwell, Haley & Aldridge, HDR Engineering, and Jacobs Engineering Group. Stay in touch at awraidaho.org.
That we're calling Meet the Professionals. So we have recorded usually about 20 to 25-minute interviews with different water resources professionals in the state of Idaho. And this is just an opportunity for you to get to know a little bit more about these professionals. So right now we have 3 of these videos, and we're trying to release a new one each month, and we send an email out when we do that as well. For today's Lunch and Learn, I'll turn it over to Kendra Kaiser to give a specific update or a specific introduction for our panelists and lead the discussion. Kendra.
Thanks. I am really excited about this today. So we actually had planned this discussion for March, right before COVID has sent us all into Zoom land. So thank you to Mark, Mike, and Tim for rescheduling and joining us today. And we're going to be talking about perspectives on Idaho water management from the ground up. So we have Tim Luke here from the Idaho Department of Water Resources. He is a Water Compliance Bureau Chief, and during his 32-year career at the department, he has spent a considerable amount of time working with water districts and working on water delivery disputes. He is a graduate of the University of Idaho with a master's in Geography and Natural Resources Management. Mike Meyers is joining us. He is the Deputy Water Master for Water District 63. And for the past 2 years, he's been there. And prior to that, he was a ditch rider and equipment operator with Pioneer Irrigation District for 5 years and worked on a farm in Nampa prior to that. And he's bringing some really cool real world experience into the administration of water distribution on the Boise River through those experiences. And then we have Mark Zirschky. He is the superintendent of the Pioneer Irrigation District, and he has been there for 28 years. And he'll tell you a little bit more about his background there. And we are really excited to just think about how irrigation works in the Treasure Valley. And, you know, we can imagine that although we're talking about the Treasure Valley today, this is how many of the districts work across the state. And I'd like to just say thank you again for all of you for joining. And I'll hand it over to you, Tim, to start us off. And Tim's going to share his screen, and then we'll have Mike chat, and then Mark, and then we can all ask questions at the end as well.
Okay, just hit share screen, or?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
All right. Now, are those, you have the slides, right?
Yeah, I have them as well. If you'd like me to put them on mine.
Yeah, if you could.
Sure. If let's see. Just a minute here. Since you have your screen up, you can also share your slides on your screen.
Okay. Not sure. Hold on just a second.
Yeah, no worries. And I just got them pulled up on mine, so I can share as well. If that's easier.
Whatever's easier.
I can. Let's see. I can bring it up here, and you can just let me know, and I can advance for you.
All right, looks good. So water districts in Idaho are created by the Idaho Department of Water Resources. In Title 42, Chapter 6 of Idaho Code governs how that process works and generally how water districts operate across the state. And so we create districts, and districts have been created over time by our agency or our predecessor agencies going back over 100 years ago for purposes of water right administration, and in particular the distribution of water from public sources like rivers and streams and even groundwater nowadays, in accordance with the various water right priorities and their dates of priority. So hopefully everybody's familiar with the water appropriation doctrine in Idaho, which is first in time is first in right. And we don't create water districts unless an area has been subject to a general adjudication of water rights by a local Idaho district court. And then over time, once those adjudications have occurred, we have designated or created these water districts. It wasn't until about 1989, I believe, late 80s, there was a more formal process introduced under code that required the department to go through a more formal process for notifying users and holding hearings and proposing a district and issuing an order for the creation of them. Prior to that, once an area was adjudicated, like a drainage basin or a portion thereof, whatever the adjudication was addressing. An adjudication is just like a big lawsuit of all the water users. It's a cataloging of all the water rights in a particular area or according to a particular source for all the various water users and water uses from that source. Let's go to the next slide. And I should say water districts are an extension of the Idaho Department of Water Resources. So we create them, but we also supervise and give guidance to those water districts. So by law, the directors is required to divide the state into water districts according to those water sources. And again, where areas have been adjudicated. And then in addition to creating new districts after an adjudication, the director may create, revise the boundaries of a district, combine districts or abolish a district in order to administer water resources appropriately. Next slide. And so we have quite a few of these across the state. Most of them, as you can see in this map, are in the south half of the state where water is a little more scarce and uses are more competitive. So there's about 120 districts that have been created over time, but about 98 of them currently are active. The inactive districts are typically small tributary streams that have adequate water supply or very few users and or very few competing interests where there's really a need to do much of any regulation. Next slide. So the features of a water district and what are they? What do they do? Again, it's a district dedicated to a particular public water source like a stream or river where we have a locally elected water master to administer and deliver the water rights from that source in accordance with their priorities. So good example, Boise River is pretty actively regulating diversions up and down the river below Lucky Peak Dam, all the way down to the border, or at least Caldwell area, and actually controls head gates and communicates with the different canal companies and irrigation districts and other users on the deliveries. So those water masters are elected annually through an annual meeting, and then they're subsequently appointed by the director. It's just really a formality on the appointment. And they're compensated directly by the users via assessments that the water master makes to the users each year. And again, they receive guidance and direction from the director. There's also an advisory committee that's elected annually, which they really don't have any power, but they are, as the word implies, they give advice to the water master and also to the director. They're instrumental in putting together the budget and resolutions for the annual meeting that sort of guides the operation of the district through the year. They just serve in an advisory capacity only, and they're selected also at the annual meeting. And they can be a good sounding board to resolve conflicts or disputes within the district to help the water master and give advice to the director. Next slide. So the duties of a water master is, as we've said, deliver water in accordance with the priority dates. They do control and regulate the head gates in accordance with the demand. They can lock them if they need to, and they are measuring and reporting diversions. So in order to deliver the available supply on the stream, and then for those who may not know, the prior appropriation doctrine, first in time is first in right, is to allocate a scarce resource. So if you had a stream or a river where you're limited in the middle of the summer to 100 CFS of available supply or flow, but you have various priority water rights that maybe add up to 200 CFS, well, obviously you can only deliver the first 100. And so you have to coordinate with those users, figure out who's calling for what, make sure they're not calling for more than their water right, and then allocate that water to the first in time users based on the demand. So that may mean that he can only deliver water rights through a priority date of, say, 1886. And all those other diversions that have water rights junior in time to 1886, like a 1896 or 1906, would be shut off and locked by the water master. Now, where we have storage reservoirs to supplement those natural flow rights, the delivery can get a little more complicated, and the demands for the storage water are coordinated with the water master, and those deliveries are made. But the accounting of that gets a little trickier. I think Mike will talk about that probably in his presentation. But the other duties here is to report annually those diversions through records and report forms to the department. And that's done in different ways, from handwritten reports to computer models and data entry applications that we maintain. And then they have to keep track of the annual expenses, and they assess the users in their district based on the annual deliveries. Next slide, Kendra. I think I'm almost done here. Oh, and to the extent they find unauthorized diversions, they generally coordinate with the department, and we can work with them to address those and follow up with enforcement actions to those users if necessary. Keep cycling through, yeah. So the Boise River Water District 63, traditionally or historically, it has been delivering water and regulating water use on the Boise River from Lucky Peak down to its confluence with the Snake River below Parma. And that is because that is where the original decrees were on the Boise River. The area or basin above Lucky Peak was not previously adjudicated by any court, and but that all changed with the Snake River Basin adjudication. Those rights were all decreed in, I want to say, around 2008 to 2010. And so we subsequently then expanded the water district in 2013 to the entire basin above Lucky Peak. Now, there's not a lot of real big diversions up there. There are quite a few smaller ones, and Mike can speak to that later perhaps, but gradually the district is in the process of inventorying all those diversions according to the water rights and starting to get them administered and measured and assessed. Much of those diversions are junior in time to a lot of the rights below Lucky Peak, so some of them will have to be regulated based on the priority dates going forward. So this is a good example of where we modified a water district and exemplifies the department's role in that respect. Next slide. This, Mike will talk about this. Perhaps this is just a snapshot of an old output of a water right accounting program. So exemplifies again the department's assistance to some of the water districts. As I said earlier, when you have multiple reservoirs in a system on top of the natural flow, water right delivery can get pretty complicated. So we have staff over the years that have developed water right accounting models or programs that assist with the tracking of the water and the determination of the priority dates based on the different available natural flow in the different reaches of the river. And it's just sort of an allocation tool for the water master. But it also keeps track of the natural flow and the storage that's delivered on a daily basis and also an annual basis to the various canals down the system. So we have 5 of these type of programs throughout the state, including Boise, the Payette River system, the Bear River, the Upper Snake River Basin Water District 1, which is above Milner Diversion Dam, and the Big Lost River. Next slide. And then finally, I just wanted to mention on our website, on our homepage under water rights, there's a tab or button for water districts, which opens this separate page. And there's a number of tabs there. If you hit the ops manual or just the FAQs, you can get a lot of the same information I've just talked about. There's a part 1, part 2 operations manual under the ops manual tab, which has a lot of basic good information on water districts and what they are, how they operate, and so forth, if you just want to get a good overview of water districts in the state. So with that, I think I'll let you move on, Kendra.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. So we'll pass it off to you, Mike.
All right. So Tim gave a pretty good overview of what a water district is and what it does. I'll just kind of go into what we do on a weekly basis when water's in and give you a snapshot of how it works. Once a week, Rex and I, what we'll do is go out on the river. We go to each diversion and either measure or record their water usage over a measuring device. We have currently about 93 diversions from the dam from Lucky Peak down to Parma. We take that information, we bring it back to the office and input that data into the department's website, and it spits out a sheet, what Rex and I call the green bar sheet, and Tim showed you that on a previous slide. And that tells us how much CFS each diversion is running, and it breaks it down on a daily. We can see each day of the previous week that we've entered, and it also tells us how much CFS is storage and how much CFS is natural flow. And I'll go into how we come up with the natural flow here in just a little bit, but it takes Rex and I a good 2 days to cover the river. As Tim said, we've expanded a little bit, to say the least. We are currently inventorying all the water rights above the dams. We go up the South Fork, the Middle Fork, and the North Fork, and even Moores Creek. I got hired on 2 years ago to pretty much do this until Rex retired. So it's been my main focus for a couple of years now. And so far we've gotten through the South Fork, the Middle Fork, currently working on the North, and Moores Creek. We're hoping to have everything inventoried by next summer. And the department's currently working on their modeling for the diversions and the reach gains to add those folks into the green bar sheet. It's been a long process. If you can imagine people diverting water for 50, 60, sometimes 100 years, and nobody telling them what to do or how to do it, you can imagine that there was some tension. There was a lot of people upset. A lot of people were very happy to see us. But that's what I'm working on. That's where I spend the most of my time, is up in the mountains. I look for what kind of diversion they have. I help them with, if they don't have a head gate or a measuring device, I help them with what kind to put in, whether it be a sipple eddy or a ramp flume or something. We work real close with them, get them into compliance with their water right in the state. And then when all that's in place, we will have to make a trip to the mountains once a week. We'll probably put in transducers and make it a monthly trip, but we'll have to take all that data and input it into that same database that the state has. And currently above the dams, we've got, let's say, about 50 diversions that we're going to have to bring into the fold. The biggest diversion we have up there is about 17 CFS, and the smallest one, a little under a CFS. And a lot of these are pumps, especially in the Moores Creek drainage. So a lot of people ask, how do we regulate water? Especially when the flows start to go down, runoff's done, flow control. And the way it works is we work off the Stewart and Bryant decree. And when natural flow, when natural flow, or when demand exceeds natural flow, we hit what's called the Stewart decree. And so let's say we're running 3,000 CFS of natural flow into the system, and demand is 3,200. We at that point have to start cutting or working off of the Stewart decree. And the Stewart decree come about in 1906, I believe. Yeah, 1906. What happened is Farmers Co-op sued Riverside Irrigation, and they're located down here towards Caldwell. Riverside blocked off the river and took all of the water out of the river, and Farmers Co-op was unable to get any. So they brought suit against Riverside, and Judge Stewart said that come up with a decision and said that when demand exceeds natural flow, we will begin cuts on the river. And it goes from 75% to a 60%. So everybody gets a share of water, of a share of natural flow. And then when the dams got built, people started supplementing that with storage water. And so we have to keep a close eye on that Stewart decree so that everybody gets their share, their fair share of water. And part of that is good measurements at people's diversions. I think one of the things Rex and I focus on the most is proper diversions? Are they measuring correctly? We have a flow meter. We go in and check them every so often. And then just accurate measurements. And I mean, that's the biggest thing I key on is a site measuring accurately. I think that's one of the most important things we can do here. So anyway, we take all that data, input it in. Once we get the report back from the state, we send it out to all the water users, and they can see how much storage they're burning on a daily basis, what their rate of natural flow diversion is. And that's pretty much how it works on the Boise River. And see, I've got a slide, but I'm on my phone, so I wasn't able to share it. One of the, let's see. Sorry, I got my slides all messed up. I think that's it for administration. Oh, we get calls every day from water users. They call our office to order water. So then we coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers to release water out of Lucky Peak. So like Mark will call us every morning, order his water in or out of his canal, and then we will and then coordinate with the Corps, make the adjustments out of Lucky Peak. And we have to maintain 240 CFS of carrying water at what we call our Middleton gauge, and that's a stream gauging just above Middleton Road. And that's how we run the river. If we go over that 240, that gets charged to storage. So it's real critical that we communicate with the irrigation districts. We have a really good working relationship with all of them. And I think they're the key to making this whole river work the way it does. Without those guys, it would be extremely difficult to administer the water on the river.
Thanks, Mike. That was all really helpful information. I have one quick question before I pass it off to Mark. I know that a big effort that y'all have done is putting in automated gauges. How many of your sites are automated?
Not a lot. We've got, want to say it's 14. And most of those folks run their own automation. Rex worked with the Bureau of Reclamation. I forget when he did it, what year it was. Got a grant and helped some of these guys get automated. And you bring up a good point. Automation has really helped conserve water on the river. It's made it easier in most cases. So we're about 14, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, I'll pass it off to Mark. Hear a little bit about how the irrigation districts make Mike's life easier.
Yeah, let me make one quick note here. Just based off your question, Kendra. All right, thank you. So, again, my name is Mark Zirschky, Superintendent, Pioneer Irrigation District. I've been employed with the district since 1992, 28 years of experience, which 12 years was a ditch rider. 6 years I was the foreman / assistant superintendent. And then the last 10 years I've been hired as the district superintendent. Pioneer delivers water to approximately 34,000 acres. We have 17 employees, and we are governed by a 3-person board. We have 2 diversions from the Boise River downstream from Eagle Island for the Phyllis and the Highline canals. Part of the diversions into our system are multiple diversions from drains and also groundwater sources. We have 53 combined pumps and wells that we can supplement into the system to assist with diverting less water from the river. Just as a sense of where the district is, our eastern boundary is Canada Road, just the edge of Ada County. On the north is the Boise River. We run all the way west to Greenleaf, and then on the south, we're middle of Nampa, about Lone Star Road. So kind of put it in perspective where the district is at. Pioneer has storage water in Lucky Peak, Arrow Rock, and Anderson Ranch Reservoir. There's approximately 61,000 acre feet of storage that we have in the 3 reservoirs. As Mike alluded to, our delivery requests are diverted into our system based on daily water orders from our 7 ditch riders. I then take that water order and place that to the water district every morning, and we request for that water to be diverted into the system or out of the system depending on our needs. One of the things that we do every day to make sure that we're being just as conservative and accurate as possible in our water deliveries is we monitor the accounting report or the green bar sheet that was referred to earlier to watch the water supply every day. We monitor the natural flow daily. All of that is an effort to determine the water availability and the length of the irrigation season. So we figure out, the easy way to look at it is, if there was no natural flow, you got 61,000 acre feet of storage, got a 180-day irrigation season approximately. How many days of irrigation water do you have based on that storage? And then of course, any natural flow offsets that, or any diversion from the drain offsets that, or supplemental groundwater supply or anything like that. Part of what, pardon me, I got messages coming in on my tablet here. Part of what Kendra wanted me to talk about was some of the challenges in the water supply for the water operation. And I'll break that into 2 points. We'll talk about challenges in the water supply and challenges with development, because I think those are 2 key things that really affect the irrigation districts today, or at least Pioneer being kind of in the middle of a heavy hit developed area right now. Challenges in the water supply, probably one of the bigger things that we're facing is the loss of water in the drains. Pioneer has water rights out of multiple drains in the district, and we're seeing the flows decline fairly rapidly. We're having to offset the amount of water that we once received from the drains and try to find alternative sources or pull water out of the river, which then obviously depletes the reservoir storage. Currently we have water rights pending, trying to seek additional water supply. We're trying to utilize every effort we can in recapture and drain supply to try to offset the system demands. So we're looking for new water development, all in, the Bureau of Reclamation. We're looking at reservoir storage. We're looking at every opportunity we can to create new water availability to offset the declining water in the drains. I think Pioneer has done a great job with our enhanced delivery methods with the use of automation. Kendra, you asked Mike how many sites are automated. Pioneer alone has 17 sites. Well, 16 built. 1 will be built this next year, but 17 sites within our system that we can remotely monitor the water level. We're to the point now that if the canal drops a little bit, it will signal a pump to kick on, and it will ramp that pump up just enough to seek the demand that we want in the canal. And we're spilling less water for operational purposes, and we're utilizing a variable frequency drive to offset the need of water in the system. So 17 of those sites that we rely on very heavily. We measure the water in the canal every week, and then we report that to the water district. So again, the accounting sheets are accurate. Every little bit or any little error sure adds up and works against you. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges in the water operation is the declining water in the drains. I was on a conference call a little bit ago, or it's actually an online conference that we were just on, and talking about the effects that the fires are having on the snow accumulation. That's definitely something that we have to be concerned with. We're seeing faster melt off with the snow based on less canopy in the mountains, and we're seeing our largest storage opportunity up in the mountains being depleted early because we don't have cover for this from the sun. I'll shift into some of the challenges that we have with development. As a ditch writer, 12 years on the ground as a ditch writer, I remember what those days look like. Mike remembers what those days look like as a ditch writer, delivering water to 7,000 acres, 8,000 acres, 12,000 acres, depending on which ditch writer you are. Development has created a scenario for us that the amount of overtime that our staff puts in now to accomplish the same job that we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago has almost doubled. It's significant the amount of time that we put in now to operate the system based on what development has created. There's more time spent on the roads. There's more time waiting on traffic. There's more fuel costs. Overtime costs are just out of this world anymore. When I was a ditch writer, I would average 80 to 100 hours of overtime in a year. Our ditch writers now are rolling up on 500 hours of overtime just in an irrigation season. So the amount of time spent on the ground based on development, the way things are changing is drastic. So that gets into the impact to our budget. Our operational costs are rising drastically. Costs for construction products, wood products and stuff like that we're purchasing right now to rebuild parts of the system have doubled in price. So we're getting hit quite heavily from, and all of that is not necessarily based on development. I know some of that is hurricane related and other things. Price of PVC products is astronomical right now. So some of that is not necessarily development driven here, but maybe hurricane related back east. But the challenges with development, the amount of residents that we have in the valley right now, we have a huge trespassing concern with people up all over the ditch banks. That has kind of morphed into a concern we have with our aquatic control in our irrigation system. We have to be very careful, and we're to the point now that we're notifying the public even more so than required for part of our aquatic controls, so we don't get people that are swimming in the canal or their animals in the canal and things like that. So all of that is getting tougher. It's taking more time, and the restrictions on the herbicides that we're using for whether it's a true environmental impact or it's just the sky is falling, it's affecting the irrigation districts as we don't have the tools in our toolbox that we once had to manage the system. So we're having to be more creative in the ways that we take care of things. We're getting back into the more mechanical methods. We're looking at, maybe more biocontrol, things like that, and it is going to be far more labor intensive and again, it's going to affect our budget. So that's kind of what I had. I can jump into anything specific that you'd like. If there's questions, I would like to leave some time for some questions, but that's from our end. Those are the challenges. I love what we do. I really engage in trying to solve these problems, and it's changing rapidly for everyone.
Thanks, Mark. I had one other quick follow-up for you as well. So given all the overtime that the ditch riders are putting in, how has staffing those positions looked for you all over time?
Well, I can put that in perspective. I've replaced 4 ditch riders in the last year, because they're going elsewhere to make a better wage and work less hours. We cannot compete with the private sector. So we're seeing a lot of turnover. You've got to love what you do. Mike and I have exchanged this and had this conversation. You have to love what you do here and want to make a difference to really be here. Somebody that's just looking for a paycheck will go elsewhere to find a paycheck where they don't have to put the time in. But we're trying to be creative in the ways that we allow the employees to benefit from that overtime. We're trying to create incentives and benefits to make it a better package for the employee.
Yeah. Thank you for all of those. And I will open up to questions. Anyone can type in questions into the chat window and I'll pass them along. And I, as always, have about a million questions to ask you all, even after spending lots of time berating Mark with questions over the past year or so. There's always new ones that come up. So if anybody else has some, definitely add them into into the message box there. I'll have start with an overarching question. So Mark, you definitely pointed to this in the fact that you've been at Pioneer for 28 years, and Mike, you've been in the water district for a long time as well. So I wonder, there is an obvious need to have a thorough understanding of these systems. And so do you all, what all do you think about just the time that it takes just to understand how to operate these systems? And Mike or Mark, you could respond to that.
Mike, you want to take that first?
That's a really good question. When I started at Pioneer, one of my first goals, I didn't really know how to run water through a ditch other than a siphon tube when I was farming. My first goal was just to learn the system. Where are things at? How does water get from point A to point B? Some people think it's pretty simple. Water runs downhill, but it gets quite a bit more complicated with checks and siphons and whatnot. It really does, like Mark said, it takes a commitment. It takes a want to be in this business and stick it out. It just takes a long time to learn everything. And I know Mark's been in it a lot longer than I have, but I think he can agree that we're learning every day, and it's complicated, I guess, to put it in a way.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it's we definitely are learning every day. I used to tell a ditch rider when they hired in, give it a full season before you really have a good understanding of how the system works. I don't know that that's so true anymore, because the way the system is changing within itself. The use of the water is changing so much. A subdivision or I shouldn't say a subdivision, a headgate delivery that we had that delivered to maybe 10 different users. They each had an acre or two. That headgate would stay on all week long, and they would just rotate around to each different user. and they all had a schedule. Irrigation practices are changing now to where one user may only want the water for 2 hours, because now they're just irrigating the lawn and shrubs because they built, you know, other things or made other use of that land. So the effort that it takes to manipulate the system, because your spills are only so big on the other end, you're adjusting the system more, you're monitoring the system more, so it's taking longer to learn how the system operates. Even with automation, it takes a lot longer to really learn the system, and the system is evolving so quickly. We have ditch riders that have been through a full season this year that I think have a great understanding of how the system works. I think they'll pick up where they left off next season, and they'll be doing really well. But I really think it takes a good full season to really have a good understanding of how that system works. But I'm still learning things every day. Mike's teaching me things. You know, we learned something about the Highline Canal that totally new to me last year. And so yeah, we're always learning.
Cool. So I have a question from Kyle Radick. He's asking whether or not Pioneer operates any pressurized systems in the developed areas.
Good question. We once did. When Pioneer started to see the development grow in the mid to late 90s, Pioneer started operating some pressurized irrigation systems. If I remember right, we had about 10 pumps that operated. We had one staff member that covered that. And we got to the point that it was costing more to operate that system than what we were able to assess. So we had the opportunity. The city of Caldwell desired to operate that system. The city of Nampa already operated their pressure irrigation system. So Pioneer opted at that time to transfer all of that work, all of the pump stations, to the city of Caldwell. So as it stands right now, Pioneer delivers through Headgate to the cities, and then they manage all the pressure irrigation.
That's an interesting setup. I didn't realize that for you all, because I know for Settlers, they manage all of their own pressurized system. Is that correct?
My understanding.
Yeah. Then Kay Homo had a question about the percentage of irrigated area in Pioneer that's ag versus residential or developed.
Yeah, and Kendra, I just took myself off mute. This is Kay Hummel. Actually, Kay is my wife. This is Jeff Faraday. Some of you know me, Tim. Hi. And I'm a retired water rights attorney, and I've got quite a bit of interest in this, so that's why I'm sitting in. So anyway, go ahead with that.
So interesting question. It used to be far more ag land in the district than there was residential, and I still think we're still offset a little bit that direction. I still think there's a little more ag land than there is residential, but it's definitely being drawn closer together. It's if it's not a 60-40, 60 being the ag lands, it's maybe about a 50-50 anymore. And after this year, we'll probably have to look at that again, because it might have taken a swing the other direction. We've got 60 some projects in the books right now of development that's going on within our district. Large part of that is subdivisions right now. So we may be a little heavier on the residential side now than we were a year ago.
Yeah. And then there's a question from Richard Llewellyn that the question is, we used to burn our ditch banks instead of spraying, which kept the perennial grasses alive and reduced erosion and invasion of exotics. Since the 1990s, herbicides replaced burning, etc. Any chance to go back to burning? Is that in the suite of options?
We burn as much as we can. February and March are largely spent burning ditch banks. I will say that that is talking about regulatory roadblocks, whatever you want to call them, hurdles, challenges. It's getting difficult to burn. We're having issues where we get shut down almost daily from somebody reporting a fire or smoke, and the fire marshal will call and shut us down. So it's getting very difficult. We're so boxed in anymore with the residential areas. If we burn a half mile of canal, the smoke is drifting right into the homes. There's complaints about, health concerns, asthma, whatever, that's requiring us to kind of take a different approach to that. So we burn as much as we can. Springtime weather really plays a role in that. If we get very much wind, we have to call DEQ every day to get an air quality report before we can burn. If the air quality is too poor, we're not allowed to burn. And we have to call the local fire department every day where we burn. And if there's a restriction there, obviously we can't burn. So there are many restrictions. Burning is a great method to get rid of a lot of this stuff. Purple loosestrife and other things that have really taken over on the ditch banks. One of the great methods to get rid of that stuff is to burn in the spring. And we're just finding that we have less opportunity to do that anymore.
Yeah. So this one might be, you might be able to answer this, Tim or Mike, but Nick has asked how natural and storage flows are estimated separately for the green bar sheet.
I'll take initial stab and then Mike can add, but you can spend a lot of time talking about that. I guess simply put, now I go with a simple example. If you had like just one river and or a tributary stream with a gauge on the bottom, and the gauge is measuring the flow and there's no storage reservoir on there, and you just add up the diversions above it, that would give you your total natural flow. And then you would just look at your water right list for the natural flow rights and to determine what priority rights are on. So once you introduce storage into it, then like on the Boise River, a series of gauges up and down the river, and then changes in storage or the storage releases are basically the program does a calculated reach gain for each reach and a determination of the natural flow in the reach and the amount of storage. So, as I said earlier, if the water master determines or the program determines the priority cut is 1886, a diversion with that's senior right is 1896. Well, technically, they wouldn't have any natural flow delivered to them. Any water they divert out of the river would be allocated from storage. So the green bar sheet would show 0 CFS natural flow. And if they were diverting 20 CFS, it would all be allocated to storage. If they had an earlier right where that was good for 10 CFS and they were diverting 20, and then 10 CFS would be natural flow, 10 would be storage.
Got it, thanks.
Yeah, and that go a little further. If we're on the Stewart decree, you have to sit down and figure out 60% or 75% of what their natural flow right is, and then subtract that out of what they're diverting, then you get their storage use. It's a pretty simple formula. It's pretty easy to do. It's just a lot of calculator work and time, basically.
And I guess I should add that Mike, the Boise River is kind of unique with respect to the Stewart decree that has that across the board percentage cut. That is pretty unique in Idaho and in fact most Western prior appropriation states. Typically, it's what I'm talking about, where it's strictly based on priority. But so that is a little unique that I overlooked.
So that's the time component that you mentioned, Mike, kind of leads into a question from Mike Schubert. So you've both talked about that things are becoming more time intensive in regards to managing these systems. And his question is regarding, is there aspects of your system operations that could offset some of that time by being automated, or are there part of operations that just cannot be automated?
That is a fantastic question. The simple answer is yes. If everything was automated, life would be easy. I'd never have to leave the office other than to verify a diversion or something. But it's very expensive to automate. When we first started automating the river and some of these diversions, the cost was around $10,000 per site. And a lot of our diversions are pretty small, basically run by 2 or 3 farmers, and they simply don't want to spend the money to put in the initial automation. And then there's the upkeep of it. If the water district were to just say we're going to automate it, we'd have to hire a full-time IT guy, and all that cost would be shared amongst everybody, because we are funded through assessments. And not everybody wants to pay $10,000 for a site that diverts 2 CFS and it's to a homeowner. So it's more of a money problem why it's not automated, but it definitely would save some time, and I think it would save a bunch of water too.
I would add to that before we had automation, look at our Indian Creek site specifically. We used to have a ditch rider drive up to that site 3 times a day to get the reading and report that reading so we could make an adjustment. Now that it's automated, I've got it on my phone, and I pull it up wherever I'm at, look at the values, change the values, and we're not paying staff to go up there anymore. So we've eliminated a lot of that employee time with the automation, and we need to look at more of that. We're getting there, but yeah, that's about the only way we're going to eliminate some of that time is utilizing tools like that.
Yeah, and I guess one of the first one that I thought of as far as like operations that can't be automated is, I know that early in the year, if there's debris or any time in the year, debris coming down the canals can clog things up, and conveniently you have a lot of automated things that will tell you if something is going weird, but you can't automate somebody going out to check to see why a gauge is reading weird, unclog something that shouldn't be in the canal or something like that.
That's our first response whenever the canal height comes up. Is that true number, or is it because a gate's plugged up? So we'll often look at that, especially if there's a lot of debris in the system. You send a ditch rider out there anyway and come back. Yep, there's a tire that got in the head gate. There's a bucket. There's a lawn chair. There's a kid's swimming pool, trampoline that blew over the fence. Yeah, that's always your go-to response, is get a body out there to look at it.
Yeah.
But there is options to have cameras attached to this stuff too, so you can look at stuff like that, and we're looking at that. We can have real-time video, pull up a site and actually see the gate and know if there's a restriction there or not.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Well, it's just after 1, and I think we probably have enough questions that we could keep you all here for a long time, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I'll just say thank you again to all 3 of you for joining. I feel like all of your presentations and answers and questions have really highlighted some of the complexities in managing these systems and the importance of coordination across all of the organizations that you represent. So thank you again. And it'd be great to be able to continue these conversations. And if other folks have questions, I can help direct you to folks as well.
Kendra, before we sign off, just one brief comment. I've posted something on here about suggested reading. As Tim well knows, I've been studying the Treasure Valley irrigation issue for a lot of years, and I've written about it partly with my colleague Michael Creamer. And I recommend these two articles to you. In my view, we are not doing in the Treasure Valley what all other Western states are doing, which is moving water off of lands that are no longer irrigated. And I think that's a problem facing Idaho. I'm not going to go further into it, but I just wanted to put in that plug for those two articles I've noted there where you can find them.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's certainly a conversation that would be great for us to continue having through AWRA. This is a great venue for us to discuss all these type of things. And one of the things that some of the other officers and I have talked about is adding a Idaho Water Resources Publications tab to the website to be able to centralize a lot of these things. So we will put that back up on the priority list. And Kathy has said that we can make sure to add those to the webinar link today. So thank you again for everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting it together, Kim.